Greetings, Rabbi Griscott here with my weekly sermon recap for the Parsha of yesterday, Va'et Hanan. And before I begin the Dvar Torah recap, I want our remarks to be in memory and in honor of Rabbi Seymour Krinsky, Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Krinsky, who just passed away on Friday, longtime prominent member of KI, who was actually our assistant rabbi way back in the early 1950s. Rabbi Salman's first assistant rabbi, as well as he actually filled in as interim rabbi for a few months or a year here and there over the years when Rabbi Salman was away or between rabbis and so on. So Morenu Harav Simcha ben Harav Yaakov, our teacher, our leader, Rabbi Simcha, the son of Rabbi Yaakov. His father was a rabbi at my alma mater, Yeshiva University, and we often connected on that. But he will be sorely missed. And I was thinking that, he always told me to call him Reb Simcha. And he had that signature small, deep voice and New York accent. And one of his favorite expressions, he would pepper our conversations with Talmudic expressions. But he would always say, HaTorach be'erev Shabbos, ochel be'Shabbos. He who prepares on Erev Shabbos gets to eat on Shabbos. And I thought how ironic it was that he passed away on Erev Shabbos in the afternoon on Friday, because he always said that. And he was a person who believed in preparing, and he would often advocate for that for the shul. You can't just leave things to fate. We as a shul have to plan for X, Y, Z. He who prepares on Friday gets to eat on Shabbos, and as it happened, he passed away Friday right before Shabbos was approaching, and the day after Tisha B'Av as well, the day after the most tragic day of the Jewish year. So his funeral is later today, 2:30. We sent out the Zoom link. But anyway, our remarks should be in his honor. So I spoke in shul yesterday about the minor holiday of Tu B'Av. Very few people know what Tu B'Av is all about. Tu, Tet Vav, is the way to express the number 15. The 15th of the month is often a holiday. It's the full moon on the 15th, and it's exactly a week after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the year, but then 7 days later on the full moon, we have the sort of counterpoint to Tisha B'Av, which is become a sort of Jewish Valentine's Day, a day of love. And the Talmud says that the young maidens of Jerusalem used to dance in the fields for the young men, and they would say, "Young men, do not look upon beauty, because as it says in Eshet Chayil, it says in Proverbs, Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi isha yiras Hashem hiti talal." Grace is vain and beauty is false, but rather a woman who fears God, she shall be lauded, a God-fearing woman of good character. And says that all the girls would borrow the same plain white clothes from each other so as not to embarrass anyone who might be able to afford a nicer wardrobe. They would all just wear borrowed clothes and the same plain white clothes. And they would do this twice a year, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. It's very surprising that that's how they would spend Yom Kippur. Generally there's in our shul we have an hour-long break, so apparently during the small break in davening, they would go out to the fields and the young women would dance for the men, and they would all pair off. But the Talmud says there are no happier days of the Jewish year than Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. Kind of surprising on a number of levels. Yom Kippur doesn't strike most people as a happy day. I always say every year in Yom Kippur, never confuse serious with sad. Yom Kippur is a very serious day, but it's not a sad day. It's the happiest day of the year. It's the day in which God forgives all of our sins. So we're not eating and we're not rejoicing, but it's very happy in a deep spiritual sense. So Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av, that's kind of, nobody heard of Tu B'Av. Those are the two happiest days of the year when we'd have these romantic dances and when the couples would pair off. So we know what Yom Kippur is all about, generally, but what's Tu B'Av all about? So it happens to be that Yom Kippur factors into the Parsha yesterday. We have the second version of the Ten Commandments. The first version is back in Exodus, and then the Ten Commandments are repeated. And there are some minor discrepancies between these two versions. So, for example, in the first version, it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, you shall remember the Sabbath day. And in the version yesterday, it says, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat, you shall guard the Sabbath day. Little differences in the two versions. So the commentaries mostly say, well, there's a neat explanation for that. It must be that the one in Exodus is the first version of the Ten Commandments, and the one in Deuteronomy is the second tablets, because there were two Ten Commandments. Moshe comes down from the mountain. He sees the people worshiping the golden calf. They ruined the covenant in only 40 days. He smashes the tablets in anger. And then God tells him to carve out a new set. And according to tradition, Moshe came down with this second set on Yom Kippur. So the first set is on Shavuos. We still celebrate Shavuos, even though that covenant didn't work out, but that's the day that we received the Torah. But the second tablets, Moshe comes down from the mountain on Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is an even holier day than Shavuos. And why is that? Because the second tablets represent God's forgiveness and God's love and the reconciliation between God and Israel. So Yom Kippur from then on became a day of forgiveness of sin and of love. And the truth is, Tu B'Av is exactly the same. According to tradition, God destroyed our temple on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av. And the reason is because of baseless hatred, sinat chinam, nothing new under the sun, hatred amongst different Jewish factions. We couldn't keep it united, we couldn't keep it together, and for that sin, the temple was destroyed. 7 days later, we look forward to the future redemption, the coming of Mashiach, and we start to focus on not on hatred and factionalism, but on love. And that's why it's a day of women dancing for men and the Jewish Valentine's Day, so to speak, and of young couples pairing off. So it's a day of love, but what happened on this day to make it that way in the first place? Well, Talmud delineates 5 historical events that happened on Tu B'Av at different times. All speak to love and reconciliation. So event number 1 is in the desert, God had decreed that every man between age 20 and 60 would die before reaching 60. And it was on the 15th of Av that that decree finally ended. That whole generation had died out, and the people realized that that plague has stopped and they'd entered a new era. So that speaks to sort of reconciliation after conflict between God and his people. The second one, and actually we don't necessarily have to go into all the events that happened. Well, maybe let's mention one other one. There was a civil war amongst the Jewish people, and there were 2 kingdoms. There was the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And the northern kingdom of Israel, Yeravam ben Nevat, the wicked king, forbade his subjects to visit Jerusalem, to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Centuries later, on the 15th of Av, the king Hoshea ben Ela lifted the sentries, the guards on the road to Jerusalem, and he said, "You know what? My subjects can make pilgrimage to Jerusalem again." And the 2 kingdoms became more united in that way. And all of the events that the Talmud lists that happen on Tisha B'Av are basically on Tu B'Av are basically in that vein. It's about coming together in reconciliation, following factionalism and tribalism. And so, to close with a thought, with the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of modern Israel, Rabbi Kook, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen Kook, he said that if the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred, or rampant, widespread hatred, it will only, perforce, you can infer, it will only be rebuilt on the basis of ahavat chinam, baseless, widespread love. And the term baseless is important. You know, you might think of that, you might look at that person and say, he does not really deserving of my love. But the term chinam is key there. Baseless love, even undeserved love. That's what we have to show. That will bring the Messiah, and that will bring the reconciliation between people, between Jews, between humanity, and between God and Israel, and God and his people. So let's all try to celebrate this so-called minor holiday, which is Tuesday night and Wednesday. The only ritual is that we skip Tachanun and Shul. We skip the sad prayer in the prayers, but people should celebrate it in their own way, as a day of love and a day of reconciliation. With that, I wish everyone a Shavua Tov.